Alrighty, here we go. We're going to talk about fermentation. Remember, fermentation, another word that you might hear commonly used is anaerobic respiration. Okay, so they kind of go hand in hand. Anaerobic respiration means without oxygen, and fermentation is the process of which a cell would go through if there's no oxygen present. All right, so two types of fermentations you need to know: alcohol fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. Okay, the difference between these two is the product that is produced and the organism that does it. Okay, so for instance, alcohol fermentation is the process that a bacteria cell, like for instance yeast, would do, and it produces ethanol, which is an alcohol. Okay, and you might see this happening if you're a baker, when you're baking bread, making beer, making wine. Those are the common cases where you'd know about that. Lactic acid fermentation done by animals, okay, by like you, me, the cat, the dog, the deer that dash off when you turn on the porch light in the middle of, across the yard, that big scurry. Those are the organisms that are going to be doing lactic acid fermentation. Okay, and the product of lactic acid fermentation is a molecule called lactate, also commonly known as lactic acid. Okay, I'm going to talk about alcohol fermentation first, and then I'll go into lactic acid, but they are very, very similar. Like I said, the end product is the only difference. All right, okay, here we go. Alcohol fermentation, the first part of it is all the same as it was with aerobic respiration. We had our food that we ate. It gets broken down to the molecular level, so we've got this glucose molecule that then enters the cell. It goes through the process of glycolysis in the cytoplasm. We know the results of glycolysis are 2 ATPs. We net 2 because we had to put 2 in to get it to go. We got 4, but because of the net, we get 2. Okay, so same thing that we talked about before. We also know that a NAD molecule is going to pick up the hydrogen that's broken off in the processing of the glucose molecule, and it's going to carry it, well, what we think to is to the electron transport chain, right? Well, it doesn't go to the electron transport chain. In the fermentation process, glycolysis is the only step that happens that's the same as aerobic respiration. After this, we've produced this pyruvate molecule, or pyruvic acid, just like we thought, but it can't go to the Krebs cycle, and it can't go to the electron transport chain because there's no oxygen present. So instead, it forks in a different direction, and where it goes is it stays right there in the cytoplasm. And the molecule pyruvate, or pyruvic acid, is going to be transformed into another molecule called acetaldehyde, okay, and carbon dioxide is going to be given off. Now, you know that carbon dioxide is given off if you're a baker, because if you've ever made bread, or you saw somebody make bread, or you talked about somebody making bread, you know that you need your dough, your ingredients, and you need it all up, and then you have to set it on the counter, or you have to put it in the refrigerator for a period of time so that the dough will, what we call, rise. Okay, and what's happening is, in that rising process, this carbon dioxide gas is being given off, and that's what inflates the dough to become like twice its size. Okay. From here, the molecule is going to continue to be transformed because we're going to deliver those hydrogen ions, and you can see that we gained hydrogen ions. If you count them here and then you look at them here, oh, yep, we did gain hydrogen ions. So that's what happened. Instead of taking it to the electron transport chain, the hydrogen ions get combined with the acetaldehyde, and you end up with an ethanol molecule. Okay, that's the short kind of version of it. Now, the same process happens in animals, except instead of the pyruvate, forming into this acetaldehyde, okay, it's going to form into lactic acid or lactate. Okay? Again, notice the molecule. It's changed. We've added some hydrogens to it. Where did they come from? Well, they came from the NADH that couriered it out. Okay, so basically that is alcohol fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. Who does it? What's the product? We know that we get lactic acid. We know we get ATP, we know we get ethanol, which is an alcohol, and we get ATP. Oh, just a word of thought, typically molecules that are in the alcohol family will end in the OL, so that's pretty common. So add that to your OSE for glucose and your ASE for enzymes. Okay, not every time, but a good chunk of the time that's a good indicator. Okay, so I think that's all I have to share with you today. Come on in prepared to take a quiz, and what's produced, what are the reactants going in, what's the name of the process, what's the products coming out. That's the same information we've been learning all along. So have a good evening. See you tomorrow.